rolling. Oh. Good morning, everyone. I see them filing in. Good morning. As you're coming in, make sure you peek the chat. Allison has some directions for us. We are going to share out where you are from, well, who you are first, where you're from, and let's talk about that spring break. What are those plans? Okay, I see Becca. She's staying in Florida.
I mean, that's okay. Florida's a good place to be on spring break.
Florida's nice. Looks like a few people are staying in Florida. Maybe going to visit a beach or try some new eateries. Good morning, good morning.
Oh, Christine Grover is being brave and going on a cruise. Good luck.
Oh, nice.
That's very brave.
See, Anna is gonna Netflix and chill. Rest and relaxation. Love it. If you're just coming in, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're super excited. We want you to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'd also love to know your spring break plans.
Mm-hmm. I'm taking 2 children to Iceland by myself, so I might be even braver than going on a cruise.
Iceland, wow.
Yes, I do not like the heat, so I'm excited to get out of here.
That is going to be exciting.
I know, I'm excited.
Okay, see a lot of people going to the beach, staying and enjoying Florida. A few going north, nice. Good morning, good morning.
Kristen Kohler is taking her junior on college visits. Kristen, I have a senior who needs to go on college visits. Can he go with you? Because I don't want to go. I'm making him go with his dad instead.
Hey, Allison, you'll have some company. Susan said that her daughter is going to Iceland as well.
There you go. I'll see her there. I'm sure we'll be in the same places. Aw.
Tiffany's taking her son on his first airplane ride. Awesome.
That's. Oh, Kristen, you'll be okay. You won't cry. You'll be excited. It's okay. As somebody who's already sent one to college, it's actually very exciting. There's, one less roommate. It's okay. You can love them from afar. I'm excited to get to miss people. Oh, still, Lake Highland, you don't have spring break yet? We don't have spring break until the 11th, but it's coming up fast.
Of March?
Yeah.
Or April. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's not far.
I guess the people who do ski weeks probably have a later spring break.
Okay. A lot of people are staying local. I see a few Disney, family time. Absolutely perfect time to just bond with family.
Okay, but Angel Feliciano is taking 42 seniors on their senior trip to North Carolina, and you win, Angel. Like that wins.
Whoa, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I see Maya says she's working with Upward Bound. Okay, awesome. Taking students to stay over in Orlando for 5 days and
Oh,
then taking them to visit all the theme parks.
you're going to get your steps in,
Awesome.
friend. That is a lot of work. Oh, it isn't until the middle. Broward doesn't go on spring break until April.
Hold on, Judy. Just hold on. And everyone else, hold on.
Hold on tight. Good Lord, that's so long. I'm so tired. I'm ready for spring break. All right, it's 9:04. So I think we're planning to start around 9:05, right?
Yes. Just one more minute.
You can't hear us. Interesting.
Well, I hope, can everyone else hear us? We have one message that you can't hear us. We want to make sure everyone can hear. Okay, I see a yes. Yep, okay, perfect.
There's Andrea.
Awesome. So the person that said they could not hear us, you may have to check your sound.
Mhm.
Make sure you're connected to your audio. So we definitely want you to hear the amazing presentations that are coming from our guest presenters. So we got to get you going. All right. All right, well, it is 9:05, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for the SACAC Virtual Florida Drive-In Workshop. My name is Monique.byrd, and the co-chair is Allison. She is right here on the screen looking lovely today. We are super excited to have everyone here, and we're excited for you to get this wonderful information today. So just as an overview, this is today's agenda. Even though you received it in your email, we just wanted to remind you of what this morning is going to look like.
We have some awesome speakers.
Yes, we do. And to jumpstart our workshop for today, we have none other than Ms. Zaire McCoy to welcome you and tell a little bit about herself. She is our current SACAC president-elect. She is also right here in the state of Florida. Zaire. Let's see. Let me see. We may have to. There we go.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Florida Virtual Drive-In Workshop. I'm excited to greet you guys for a few minutes this morning and offer, oh, hold on, I'm getting some instruction. Love this so much. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So good morning again. I think one of the best things right about COVID and allowing us to be connected in a virtual way is that there are still some, key things that make it fun to be disruptive in this process as we get connected. But anyway, so good morning and welcome to this Florida Virtual Drive-In Workshop today. As Monique was so kind to introduce me, I am Zaire McCoy. In my current day job, I serve as an Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admission at Rollins College, which is a small private liberal arts college in Winter Park, adjacent to the city of Orlando. We have been here and operating successfully since 1885. So excited to be here and have been at Rollins for about 5 years. My role here in this capacity, I do have the honor and privilege of serving as the SACAC president-elect, and come April 4th, my term as president will begin. And I hope that many of you are registered for our annual meeting that is coming up on April 3rd through the 5th at Champions Gate in Orlando, just right outside of Orlando. And so I'm excited to see many of you. Many of you have submitted session proposals that have been accepted, and we really look forward to you sharing your professional expertise and creating conversation and room for individuals who are new to the profession, but also those of us that are seasoned. I don't know about you, but I know that I am delighted to be back in person. It's been a long time, and this is the first conference since 2019 that we've been able to gather in person. So I know that there will be a lot of excitement. Yes, and I see your comments that you absolutely should work to register for the conference as you are able. And so anyway, just really wanted to thank you and really appreciate this time, even while virtually, for you guys to engage and connect and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make Florida better, make Florida stronger, and provide opportunities for our students to engage in any kind of post-secondary opportunity for them. So I know we have a great lineup of presentations and really look forward to doing what we can, not only for Florida specifically, but the SACAC region overall. And I know that Florida certainly is a leader within our region. So I'm excited to be in partnership with you guys as your incoming president, but more importantly, to be able to serve the needs of this great state of Florida. So I'll leave my remarks to that. Thank you to Allison and Monique for hosting us this morning. And I hope you guys enjoy the program.
Thank you so much. And you heard Zaire mention about the upcoming conference. Don't you worry. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. So you want to make sure that you stick around the entire time so you can get some details about the conference that is coming up. All right, Allison, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, our first session this morning is on culturally responsive counseling. And we are so excited and lucky to have Andrea Flores presenting this morning from FSU. Andrea Flores is a multicultural admissions counselor at Florida State University. She has the unique perspective of having experience working in both higher education as well as at the high school level as a college and career specialist. She graduated from FSU in 2012 with a bachelor's degree in psychology and has since held a variety of positions in social services, secondary education, and higher education, where she has been committed to creating access and opportunity for her students. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here this morning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. Allison, I don't know if you want to give me co-host privileges so I can turn on my camera.
Yes.
You guys can see my face.
Yes, we would love to. I believe that Monique is doing that right now. Hold on. There you go. You are co-host now.
Ta-da. Awesome. Hello. Well, hello, everyone. I am super excited to be here with you all this morning. As Allison had mentioned, my name is Andrea Flores. I am a multicultural admissions counselor at Florida State University. I cover the Central Florida region, so I actually live and work out of Orlando. See a lot of familiar faces on the participant list, so I'm really excited to share just a different perspective kind of my professional experience. I know I've talked to a lot of you about Florida State, and I'm super excited to obviously continue to do that, but it'll be interesting today to kind of switch gears a little bit. I also had the perspective of being a college and career specialist here in Orange County as well. I see some of my fellow college and career specialists on the list. So hi, guys. But it was really interesting, right? It provided so much perspective for me, kind of two sides of the same coin, right? So we're working with the same students, we're helping them achieve those same goals, but ultimately it looks different. And I think that especially these last 2 years, it looks even more different, right? And so I think it is even more important after the past 2 years that we are being more culturally responsive in kind of how we're approaching this post-secondary piece of our students' lives. You can go ahead to the next slide, Monique, please. And I chose to call this post-secondary advocacy because advocacy is not something that is a foreign concept for most counselors, right? aside from, the fame and fortune that comes with being a school counselor. I'm sure that most of you got into this field because you wanted to help, right? You wanted to help students who are oftentimes going to be overlooked in this process, who may not know what their options are. And so we advocate on a daily basis. We advocate for academics, for course selections. We advocate for mental and physical health, probably now more so than ever. I was telling Allison last week when we were talking about how many essays I read this year regarding mental health and students who are struggling with that. I would literally venture to say probably 1 in 4. It was a huge number. But a lot of them talked about the great adults in their lives who have helped them to manage these obstacles and really to overcome them. And so that's a really important piece of our jobs. We also help students with those peer and family relationships, make sure that they are healthy and that they're moving through those in a way that's helpful for them. And so that post-secondary piece and really helping them in that transition from college or from high school into college is just another piece to that puzzle, right? It's just something else that we do. Go to the next slide, Dean. So I always feel like definitions are super helpful, especially when we're talking about things that are a little bit vague, just kind of helps to ground our conversation. So I want to define 2 different things. So one would be cultural identity, and then of course, cultural responsiveness, which is what we're going to talk about today. And so I think it's really easy when we talk about culture to kind of assume that it's somebody from somewhere else who has culture or customs that are different than us. And of course, that does encompass culture, but there are so many other elements, right? There are so many other things that go into a student and a person's cultural identity. And so I found this graphic online. I think it's super, super helpful in just breaking down the different elements that would contribute to someone's cultural identity. So their gender, their race and ethnicity, of course, age, socioeconomic status, and class. For me, that's a really important piece, right? A lot of us are working with students who are the first in their families to navigate this post-secondary process. And that really impacts kind of their view on this process and their ability to kind of manage these steps. So that really changes how we should be approaching this for students in those first generation settings. Religion, sexual orientation, language, mental and physical ability. That one was interesting to me. I was like, man, I don't ever think about that, but that absolutely could play into that identity of a student. I also think that it's important to know that there could be a combination of these things, right? So not one thing is going to define a student. Some things may be more important for other students than others. And so I think one of the main goals when we're talking about working with students through this cultural process, this identity process, is understanding that we're never going to know everything about everything, right? We're never going to know everything about every culture or every type of identity that a student has. But understanding that everybody is coming in with those different perspectives is a mindset that really helps us to serve them in a way that's helpful for them. So when we talk about cultural responsiveness, and you can just go back 1 second. Sorry. I talk a lot, guys. I'm sorry. I hope this presentation fits my time. I feel really, really connected and really passionate about this stuff. So I'm happy to share the presentation if we don't get through it. But anyways, cultural responsiveness is essentially that part of our jobs, especially in education, in connecting the cultures, the languages, and the life experiences of students to what they're learning in school, right? So that cultural responsiveness can be in the classroom, right? It can be in math, and it can be in history, and it can be in all of those things. But also as a counselor, it's really important in this post-secondary piece, right? What experiences, what knowledge are students coming in with, and how can we utilize that in our counseling practices, right? In our post-secondary planning for those students. I think the most important piece here, right, is that when you do that, right, when you make those connections for those students, you're getting a lot of buy-in from them, right? They see that they have a seat at the table. And so they're going to be more invested in pursuing a lot of these things that you're telling them. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that there is a ton of research that shows that these connections help them to access more rigorous curriculum, develop those higher level academic skills. You're giving them confidence to know that they're part of this process, right? They're not kind of on the outskirts of that. And so we're incorporating them, we're bringing them in, giving them access to these higher, academic, more rigorous curriculums and more rigorous skills, which is ultimately going to make them more competitive for college, right? So it's a process. We all know that every single year, especially in Florida, colleges are becoming more and more competitive. And so being able to make these connections for students is going to help prepare them for that competitive admission cycle. Okay, we can go to that. Thank you. So looking at the numbers, I always think this is also an important piece. I pulled some of the 2020 census data from the state of Florida. And this was super interesting to me. 68.7% of the people in Florida identify as part of a minority or underrepresented group. That is huge. And so it just shows how important being culturally responsive is, how many students are coming into our schools from all sorts of different backgrounds and experiences, and why being culturally responsive in what we're doing is really impactful. I think the other thing I want to make note of on this slide is that this will look different depending on where you are in Florida, right? So I'm here in Orlando. We probably look pretty similar to these demographics, but it might vary, right? So some of you all in Miami, you can see, the Hispanic and Latino population down in Miami, much, much, much higher than the state averages. I think the important point to take away from this is that we should be familiar with the populations that we're serving. If you don't know this information about the specific school where you work and where you serve, I think it's important to know that, right? Who are the students that are in your school setting? And that's going to help guide a lot of the programming that you create so that you're doing it in a way that's efficient and also a way that's helpful for the actual students that are in your school. Next slide. So I would be remiss to talk about anything related to diversity or cultural responsiveness or all of the things without identifying or talking about imposter syndrome. Some of you may have heard of this. This may be new for others, but this is something that a lot of students may be struggling with kind of in this post-secondary leap, in this post-secondary process. Now, imposter syndrome is essentially a psychological phenomenon that is the persistent inability to believe one's success is deserved or has been legitimate. Go back for me. Thank you. That it has been, the persistent inability to believe one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. Essentially, it's about doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud, right? The achievements that you have, the goals that you've achieved are not because of you or your skills, but they're because of luck, or they're because you just happen to get an easy teacher or all of these things, right? And so this is something that disproportionately impacts people of minority and underserved populations. It also, even more so, impacts high-performing students who are part of these underserved populations. And so I mean that by saying that these are your students that will come into your office that have amazing grades, have a really, really good test score, are the first in their family to go to college, right? So nobody in their family has ever done this before. The student is super, super successful, has been very successful in their 4 years of high school. And now they're sitting down with you and you're telling them about Westbridge and about all of these top 20 institutions who are going to meet their financial need and all of these amazing, amazing things that are coming around. But ultimately, that can be really difficult for a lot of students to swallow, right? They may be feeling doubt. They might be doubting where they're going. Where they have been. They might be doubting all of those things. And so as a counselor, I think it's important to obviously know what imposter syndrome is, but I think it's also important to share that information with our students, right? It is completely normal to feel like maybe, this isn't my place, sit in those feelings, understand that that's okay, but continue to reaffirm that you've worked really hard, you are really, really intelligent, and you deserve this just as much as anybody else does, right? I love this graphic up at the top that shows like what or the assumption for students with imposter syndrome is going to be that they know very, very little and everybody else knows a whole lot. And then the reality of it, of course, is that there's pretty equal ground there, right? I also broke down some different types of imposter syndrome. This is stuff that you might see in behaviors and in ways that students are acting. You may see that student that totally overworks themselves to make up for how inadequate they feel. They may set just exceedingly higher goals that they feel completely crushed when they can't meet. They're never satisfied with their level of understanding. They're always trying to learn more. You see them always sitting and cramming it over and over and over again for tests that that they are super prepared for. They may be a perfectionist, so never completely happy with their work, always kind of focused on negative things, or that soloist, right? So they want to be alone. They're afraid to kind of say what they think or say, whatever they're feeling because of that fear of appearing weak or incompetent, right? So understanding that pressure is important. And I think informing students of that pressure is even more important, right? I also don't know about you guys, but like I read through this and I was like, oh, I've totally felt like that before, right? So it's important to know that. I think a big piece of psychology and the different types of phenomenons that are out there is just about understanding that it's okay and that lots of other people are feeling this way. And I can help support you through this process. So that is imposter syndrome. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about how do we help students in this more culturally responsive way in our schools and in the settings where we are. So there's this really interesting article that came out in the 90s. In the article, they identify 5 steps that students have to move through in order to be ready to enroll in college. And so they go through and they identify these 5 steps as 1, having to build those aspirations to go to college, 2, having to make the necessary preparations to be qualified to attend college, which I think is a really important component. They then have to take entrance exams, apply to college, and enroll in college, right? And so in the research in this article, what they actually found was that students who are first generation or students who come from minority or underrepresented populations typically have the biggest disparities in step 1 and step 2. So super, super important. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? When it comes to that. And I also think that in counseling and in high school, we do 3, 4, and 5 really well, right? We probably have a process. We know how students are going to access those, SAT or ACT. We have fee waivers to help with that. We do school day SAT to help with transportation and to overcome those obstacles. We have different workshops and things to help students complete their applications and enroll in college and all of the things. But I think that the area where we can focus today is really on those steps 1 and 2. Those are, of course, the more subjective ones. But I think there is opportunities there for us to be more culturally responsive in helping students to build those aspirations. And then, of course, making sure that they're qualified to attend college. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the first step, right? Building those aspirations to go to college. Now, first generation students are the first ones that pop into my head. I was a first generation college student, but my husband and I both have advanced degrees. I have a 5-year-old little boy, and he knows mommy's school, he knows daddy's school, he knows what college is, as much as he can at 5 years old. We have those conversations. And so his whole life, he's going to have been exposed to this conversation of college, what this means, all of the things. A lot of first generation students don't have that background, right? So they're not coming from a place where they may have heard, yeah, go to college, do these things, but they might not have those specific relationships that help foster the idea of what college means. They may have even heard some negative stuff about college, right? They may have heard that college is too expensive. They may have heard that it's a waste of time. There's a lot of other things that they may have experienced at home before they're actually coming in to the high school setting and starting to prepare for that higher education, that post-secondary piece. They also may have heard a ton of myths about finances and paying for college. College is expensive. I think we can all agree there. But I will say that it is not expensive as most students think it is. When I used to do a presentation, which I'll talk about now in the high school setting, I used to ask students how much they thought it cost to go to Valencia College, which is the community college, the state college here in Orlando. And I would get overwhelmingly $30,000, right? Students thought it was really, really, really expensive to go to these schools. And so I think it's important from the very beginning when you start having these conversations, even with 9th graders and 10th graders, is to correct those myths, because college is expensive. But college, when a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old is trying to figure out what expensive means, they might be creating things in their head that are completely over and above, what the actual reality of it is. And then I think it's also important to talk about things like the Pell Grant, to talk about things like scholarships and funding that is going to help them pay for college, so that even when you're coming and telling them, hey, Valencia will cost you about $3,000, $3,500 a year, and your Pell Grant is going to give you about $6,000, right? So helping them to understand that if money is the issue, that should not be an obstacle to them being able to achieve those goals. I think being really open, and I know not every 14-year-old or 15-year-old is ready to actually sit down and have a conversation about college, but having those very distinct talking points that you are showing them that early on can take away a lot of those preconceived notions that like, oh, I'm not going to college because I can't afford it type of thing. There is also a very one-dimensional view of what college is, right? And I feel like this sometimes can extend outside of first gen. It can extend outside of minority populations. When I say college, right, everybody thinks of Florida State, right? Go Noles. They think of Harvard, they think of Yale, they think of University of Florida. You have this very one-dimensional view of what college looks like, right? So I think an important part of our jobs as counselors is to really be able to differentiate between like, what's a 2-year college? What's a 4-year college? What's a technical school? What types of students do these schools serve? And how do your goals fit into those specific areas, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially when you get those students who may not be, super high performing students, maybe want to work with their hands. They want to work in a more, hands-on type setting. When you're telling them you're going to have to do high school for 4 years again, but at the college level, when they're already struggling through high school, right? That becomes an end of conversation point for them. Like you're sitting down and you're telling them, essentially, you're going to go to a 4-year college, and that's not something that's set up for you, right? So I think that it's important to be able to show them the different opportunities when it comes to college. And it's very easy for us to kind of say college, right? But there are a lot of things underneath that umbrella that can really help them to figure out what's going to be their best plan. And I always used to tell my students this. So at the bottom of the screen, you see, I need you to have a plan. I don't need you to have my plan, right? So I can sit down, I can talk to you about all the benefits of a 4-year institution. I can talk to you about all the benefits of a 2-year institution, but I want you to do the research, and I have the confidence in you for you to know what's best for you. And so being able to support them with whatever that plan is. Last but not least, not last but not least, sorry guys, you got some more of me. But number 2, that second step in that college pipeline is making necessary preparations to be academically qualified to attend college. So I think some of the things that our first-gen students and our minority underserved population students might struggle with when it comes to this piece, right? So again, when I talked about cultural responsiveness, I talked about giving them that confidence to be able to access that more engaging, the more advanced coursework. That's something that's going to help them if they are going into a 4-year institution, or if they are going through the competitive college admissions process, right? So that knowledge of differing levels of rigor is so important. And it's something that actually falls by the wayside a lot of times, right? So like I said, I was a first-generation college student. My parents had no idea what AP was. They had no idea what honors was. In their mind, it was like, get straight A's. That's the best you can do, right? Get straight A's. And so I had a ton of students, especially while I was at the high school level, that would come to me and be like, but I have straight A's. I'm like, but you haven't taken one honors class. So like, we need to sit down and talk about like what competitive college admissions looks like, what they're looking for, right? And being able to give them that information early on so that we're not having that conversation in 12th grade, right? Which is something that I now work with a lot when I'm, at the higher ed level, because I don't really engage with students past people that are actually applying to the university, right? So I think it's important to have students know those differing levels of rigor pretty early on in the process. I also think it's super important to link majors to careers. A lot of students don't understand that process, right? Again, they see college as high school 2.0, right? I go to 4 years of high school, now I need to graduate and go to 4 years of college. And they don't understand how those 4 years of college should essentially prepare you for a career or for a path of some sort. And so being able to find what you're passionate about, which great if they do, right? But let's be realistic. Not every, 14-year-old, 15-year-old is going to find a passion, and that's okay. But being able to find that path, right? So what types of things do you like? What types of, what subjects are you strong at? How does that translate into different types of careers? I was on a panel with the University of Chicago, and the director made a really interesting point. And he said that in high school, students are exposed to literally like 5 subjects, right? So like English, math, natural sciences, social sciences, and that's really the extent of their knowledge. So when you're going and asking them, hey, my school has 276 different options. What do you want to study? Like, that's super overwhelming, especially when they're coming from a setting that they've only really been exposed to a very small handful of those subject areas, right? So as a counselor, really encouraging career exploration, and what types of things would you be interested in pursuing. A lot of us do have, like our districts provide Naviance or SCORE, different types of platforms like that have built in, career exploration tools and different things. I'll show you a couple of just general websites too at the end of the presentation that are helpful for that too. So just encouraging students to do that piece too, right? That research piece. And then understanding the relationship between interests and activities is always really, really important. When it comes to competitive applications specifically, we don't want students to just pad resumes, right? It's really, really important for them to find stuff that they like to do. That also may spawn an interest in a specific career path, a specific major. So it's all linked together, right? Encouraging students to be a part of those things outside of the classroom, not because it's going to look good on a college application, but rather because it's something that they feel connected to, that they really like to do. I know that a lot of first gen and minority students do struggle with participating in activities after school. They may have family circumstances, they may have other things that stop them from participating in those traditional activities. And I think colleges have done a really, really good job lately of taking that into consideration. So I think that as a counselor, if you are working with a student who has excelled academically and does really well in the school setting, but for whatever reason cannot participate in those additional activities, just make sure that you're working with them to identify that at some point in the application. So whether it's through their essay, whether it's through their resume, because you can creatively put down, that they watch a younger sibling or that they have a full-time job or whatever that may be. And I think that a lot of colleges have been really receptive of that lately, which is nice. Next slide. All right, so how do we do this, right? How do we talk about all of these things that we want students to know very early on and, add that to the list of the million other things that school counselors do? So I wanted to pose an idea. This is something that I did while I was at the high school setting. I created a presentation that I called College 101, literally went back to the basics, broke down like, what's a major? What are the different types of colleges? How does the 4-year process work, right? So talked a lot about like 2x2 programs in the state of Florida. So if you start at a community college, you can do your AA degree and you can transfer into a 4-year institution. So all of those things that I think are really useful in knowing beforehand. This was an early conversation. It was something that I invited all grade levels to. I incorporated families because let's be real, not every 14 and 15-year-old is going to be interested, right? Or going to like sit through a whole presentation. But their families most definitely will be. So they usually want to know these things, and providing parents with the information early enough where they can then help support their students through the process, I think is a really helpful piece. Consider language when you are incorporating families. And so when I did College 101, we had it in, we translated it into Spanish and into Haitian Creole because that was the population that we served. And I felt like that would have been helpful. A lot of our students had recently immigrated to the United States. And so while the students maybe were fine with English, maybe the parents had really limited knowledge in English. And so I provided these presentations in their language, in their native language. I know that not everybody has access to that, but you can kind of channel your resources at schools, right? You have, ELL coordinators and language teachers and AVID teachers and different things throughout campus that if you don't necessarily speak a language or have somebody in your counseling office that does, you might be able to get some buy-in and some help from people around your campus. But I think it's really, really helpful. I mean, every time I did anything in Spanish, I constantly had families coming to me, thanking me so much for providing that, because you have to remember that this too, especially for families who have immigrated from other countries, this process is brand new for them. So even if they attended college in another country, they may be coming here, and our competitive college admissions process is very, very different than what they're used to. And so we are really like going back down to like bare bones basics. I know that for us, we do this every single day, but it is super important to go into those, basic college information. What else is on here? Let's see. When we are talking to students specifically, giving them concrete examples of things like what a GPA is. You would be so surprised, and I'm sure you guys see this on the daily, but how students are in 12th grade and have yet to know what a GPA is when you talk about that. So again, really important piece with arming students with the tools to be able to be successful in those 4 years. We want to make sure that they understand, what do colleges look at? How do they interpret the grades and the information that you're giving them? And that's really important, just really as early as you can, because you want students to be able to start off on the right foot. Also, basic college knowledge, that rhymes, I just realized that. But a lot of first generation students especially have really, really basic questions that they are usually afraid to ask because they feel like somebody's gonna be like, oh, like you should know that already. So things like, where am I gonna live? How do I eat? Where do I eat? You know, how do I get around? If I don't have a car, so like, how would I get around? How do I go to my classes? What does college look like, right? I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with 12th graders where I was like, college is not like high school. You're not going to come here at 7:30 in the morning and then stay, you know, until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, that's not how that works. And so that was a really important piece. I think this basic college kind of questions and knowledge might be really helpful in like a panel type setting where you're bringing students who are first gen, students who have already, you know, gone through this process, maybe finishing out their first year of college, who have graduated from your school specifically, who students may have, you know, knowledge of, they may know a younger sibling, they may have known them when they were at your school, and bringing them in and being like, talk about your first year, you know, tell us about all of those things, all those little things that students worry about and think about when it does come to that college planning piece. All right. So how are some ways that we can put this into practice? I know that counselors literally have a to-do list, probably longer than, you know, than there are hours in the day. But I think that, again, knowing that you don't have to, part of being culturally responsive is not about knowing everything about everyone, right? It's just about being open, being accessible, trying to find ways to help serve the students that you specifically have at your school, right? That goes back to talking about those demographics, right? Understanding who is the population that I serve and what types of things could they benefit from. Increasing those partnerships across campus. That is super, super, super important. Getting, you know, buy-in from different multicultural clubs on campus, ELL coordinators, language teachers, SAFE coordinators, social workers, AVID, you know, whatever your school may have. That's a really, really important piece, because when we are trying to provide services in another language, for example, that we don't speak, we may be able to channel those resources and have them come in and help out. Also incorporating training and professional development for the adults at school. If you want to sit down as a counselor and talk about all the different post-secondary options, you want to sit down and inform them of the different programs, you know, that tend to be popular in your area. That is only going to help students, because not every student is going to pop up in your office, right? Not every student is going to feel like they can come into, you know, the counselor's office for whatever reason. But students will confide in someone, right? They might confide in their math teacher, they might confide in their coach. And so making sure that the people at your school are at least generally knowledgeable about some different opportunities for them when it comes to that post-secondary plan is going to help you, right? Even if they know that, like, hey, the coach only knows about this specific program, but the kid's going to come to the coach is then going to come to you and be like, hey, can you reach out and help me out with this? That's only going to help us increase that access more. It's going to help us to reach more students. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, you know, knowing your specific school population, knowing your demographics, that's a really, really important piece. As a school in general, you can come up with more efficient ways to work with students, more efficient ways to serve the specific students that you serve. Being accessible. This is a really big one, because we don't know. So I always imagine, right, like you're super high performing first gen kid who is completely overwhelmed, right? They have been told about all of these amazing opportunities, but this is really the first time in their life that they are actually venturing out and, you know, leaving home. Nobody else in their family has done this, like a lot of pressure associated with that, right? And so if that student is taking that first step or making that effort to come in and ask you for help, try your best to accommodate them. I think sometimes when we might be right in the middle of something, we might have an hour-long, task that has now taken us 3 days because we continue to be interrupted. But in that moment when that student is coming and asking you for help, I think that is a very great opportunity to show them like, hey, you matter. Yes, I can help you with whatever it is that we're going to do. And I know that sometimes that's not going to be the case and it's not a possibility, but if you absolutely can, I can't tell you how many students I had just like, okay, just sit down. You want to do FAFSA? All right, great. Sit down, open up your laptop. And I just kind of was simultaneously doing my stuff while also helping them with that. But that really conveys a message to them that like, yes, like you matter. I care about this process for you. And that's going to open up that line of dialogue so that they are then coming back to you for help and assistance throughout the process. Communicate in a way that works for students. I know it's very easy to just like forward out an email, but I don't know if anybody's ever seen a 17-year-old's email inbox. It was overwhelming to me to see those inboxes. They would open it up and like, I'm literally the person that can't even have like the little one notification like on my mail on my phone. And so they would open it up and be like thousands of unread messages. And it was just like too much, right? And so that's too much for them, right? They're not going through any of that. They're not actually absorbing any of the information that's there. And so I think one, giving them the tools early on so that they know what to look for, so that they have those plans early on. They're not getting overwhelmed by all of that email spam that's coming through, but also finding different ways that might serve them better, that might be easier to kind of get that information out to them. So whether that's texting, I know there's like things like Remind and different things that you can send out text messages, or maybe it's like, reaching out to specific teachers that you have partnerships with or that you have a relationship with and saying, hey, I have this scholarship. Do you have any specific students that you think might be a good fit for it, right? And so that way you're actually, recognizing and identifying students individually so that you're able to reach out to them, talk to them specifically, and things don't get lost in that sea of unread emails. And then of course, helping to consolidate the information, right? So we do this on a daily basis. I think for me, especially at FSU, it is very easy for me to just rattle through the application process. And sometimes it's really hard to take a step back and be like, oh, wait, like this is the first time you're hearing this. And so when it comes to these big plans, things, that students are making, these big goals that students have, I think it's really important as a counselor to help them figure out like, this is what's important. This is what's not. These are the target things that we need to focus on. Everything else can just kind of go by the wayside right now. And I think that helps them to not feel so overwhelmed. Next slide. So some resources, like I mentioned, these are very, very general resources. But like I mentioned, I know a lot of you guys have access to things like SCORE and Naviance through your district. Definitely want to give students the ability to utilize those and know like all of the really cool resources that are available through those platforms. But if you don't have that, if your district doesn't offer that, things like Big Future, Florida Shines, My Florida Future have a ton of like, especially like the career planning piece, different tools and things like that that students can use, breakdowns of financial aid, how to pay for college, all of that good stuff. And then the next slide. If you want to increase your knowledge of this diversity piece of being more culturally responsive and understanding the different struggles, things that our students are going through, I put a couple of random conferences and things like that tend to focus more specifically on that. The NACAC Guiding the Way to Inclusion Conference is in July. I have not been there myself, but I have colleagues that have, and they say it's a phenomenal conference. And then some College Board stuff that is more specific to certain groups. So A Dream Deferred is actually happening right now in Washington, D.C. That focuses on working with African-American youth. Preparatory in New York City in April. I will actually be presenting there. So if you're coming, look for me. And the NASAI, the Native American Student Advocacy Institute in June in Phoenix. There are a ton more. Definitely look out. I saw a really cool thing that SACAC hosts a book club about inclusion and diversity as well. So that's another great thing. And I think that that's the important piece, right? It's less about like do X, Y, and Z and more about just trying to understand that our students are coming from really diverse places and diverse life experiences. And it's a really, and it's really a part of our job to just be more open and accessible to things like that. And last but I think, last but not least, this is my contact information. If you have, I think we have a couple questions or maybe one that I saw pop up. But if you have questions after today, feel free to jot down my email. If you want to yell at me about FSU decisions, don't. I'm happy to answer FSU questions too. But if you need someone to bounce some ideas off of, or you're just, want some specific advice on a certain student, I'm not an expert in this, but I definitely do feel like this is very close to my heart, and I love being able to help with this access piece. And so I hope this was informative. I hope this was helpful. These last 2 years, guys, have been really, really rough. And the fact that you guys are even still sitting here today is just a testament to how committed you are to students. And so that's a really important thing. And last but not least, I do want to say that I know counseling is a very thankless job at times. But like I said, I read thousands of essays this year, and a lot of them focused on mental health, and a lot of them focused on adults in their lives who had helped them navigate these past 2 years and help them really overcome these obstacles. And you guys are a lot of those adults. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for the commitment that you have to students. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was really helpful and informative. I learned a lot, and you have me thinking about so many things. So now I just want you to come speak to my entire faculty, if that's okay. Maybe one by one. And I have also identified myself as a superhero perfectionist. So perhaps I'll be talking about that with my therapist this week.
Me too, don't worry. I literally was putting this together and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh, hi, that's me. I do that. Yes. I wanted to say one person was Elisa Mora, who you know, and hi, Elisa. She brought up parents, and I wanted to ask you about that, just in how to navigate, because that is definitely something that I know comes up in my office a lot, is how to navigate the expectations and backgrounds of your parents when you are advising students and helping students from all these different backgrounds. I know that my school is very international, and our international parents might have only heard of very few schools, as you brought up, but sometimes balancing that parent and student interaction is really tough. If you wanted to speak to that a little bit, that might be really helpful.
Sure. It's hard. It's a really, really hard thing. And I always would joke that parents would come in and be like, my student's going to Harvard, because that's literally like the only, university that they've heard of, or like how it works. And in Florida, we get that too, right? We get Florida State, we get University of Florida, we get very kind of one-dimensional views of like what college goals are. I think a couple things to help manage that is, of course, that early intervention of telling them like, look, we want to find your student a place that's going to be the best fit for them. That may be one of these institutions that you're talking about, that may not. And really educating parents on that piece. So I think that's always helpful. It doesn't always, lead to them being very receptive of that. But I think even just encouraging them to say, okay, we're going to apply to these schools that you want to apply to, but let's also, add in a couple others. Let's try to find some different opportunities for your student, just in case, type of thing. I also think it's always important to show them like acceptance rates, and let's talk about, how competitive these schools are. Because as much as, yes, we can work with your student to figure out everything and work them through this application process, I think a really big piece of that is saying like, your student could do everything right and still not get into the school, right? So what is our plan B? How do we figure out what's going to be that next option if they're not successful in doing that? And so I think that has become more so a conversation that has had to happen, especially with a lot of the state schools. I probably every single year have a conversation with a family that's like, I have 3 kids. This is my last one. She's by far the smartest out of all 3. And how did she get denied? And the other 2 got in, right? And so that's a difficult piece too. But I think it's important just to show them that you're essentially competing with the group of kids that are applying with your student, right? So every year that's going to look different. So because one child or sibling got in doesn't necessarily mean that the next year this other child is going to get in. And so just working with them to say like, we're gonna work on making this the best application that we can, and we're gonna add in as much as we can, but let's have a plan B. And so I think that usually helps to mediate some stuff, but it is hard. It's a process.
I also think from one of the other questions I had, sorry, I am a report, I ask a lot of questions my own self, but I was going to ask you, how do we combat, especially being Florida counselors, since you brought up FSU admissions, not me, you brought it up. How do we combat what I see as growing hysteria about FSU and UF admissions and somewhat UCF admissions, just because they've been a little bit slow to release this year from staffing shortages? How do we combat that with our kids who already have imposter syndrome? Now they think that UF and FSU are Harvard and Yale. Like I feel like I'm seeing a lot of kids who are like, I'm not even going to bother because I'm not going to be able to get in. How do we get the numbers to show them that actually like it's not Harvard or Yale, like you can get in, you need to apply? How do we combat that?
So I think that the biggest thing, and one of the things that I always fall back on when I'm talking to students specifically, is like UF and FSU do not have, like literally do not have a minimum GPA, a minimum test score, things like that, right? So they really do have a holistic approach to the way that they're reviewing your application.
Yeah.
What that means is that I don't care, if you are not a strong test taker, right? If the rest of your application is super strong, you still have a chance, right? We're not sitting down and telling you that if you don't have this GPA and if you don't have this test score, don't even bother, right? And I think that this year, especially with as competitive as FSU has been, looking at the numbers, we did such a good job, I feel like, of really accepting a varied class. Our class was not, there were kids that got denials who had really high SAT scores. And that in previous years, I don't think has necessarily been a really big thing. But we did a really good job this year, I feel like, of really getting into the core of students and figuring out who's going to be the best fit for our institution specifically, right? So that's not to say anything about the student. It's not to say anything that student is not going to be successful in college, because most of the kids are going to do fine, right? I also think that another great tool as a counselor in a high school setting is to show kids the other wonderful 10 state universities that we have in this state, and help them to kind of see that. I had a student whose parents were actually diehard Gators. I mean, they were like, that was where she was going. And we worked together. She applied to UF, she applied to FSU because she wanted to apply to FSU. And then she applied to another institution in the state of Florida. And we actually ended up, she got admitted to all three. And it actually ended up being the other state institution. She didn't go to FSU or UF, because as we sat down and we talked about it and we looked at her financial aid packages and we looked at, the campus after she visited all three campuses, she really sat down, and I was so proud of her because she sat down with her parents and she was like, this is where I want to be. And it wasn't because of the name and it wasn't because of the recognition, but like she truly found her fit. And her parents were okay with it eventually, right? Like they were happy that their child had ultimately found where she wanted to be. And so I think that sometimes it's more of a struggle, but I think that it's so important to show students that there's other options. I love FSU. I'd love for everybody, I had a phenomenal experience at FSU as a student. I obviously came back and worked here, so it's pretty fine. But I feel like you can have an amazing experience wherever you go. And I think ultimately, there's a place for everyone. I read some statistic, and I think I was telling Monique this, but I read some statistic that showed that there are literally seats at a college for every student graduating from high school. Like there are 4-year institutions with space for every single student. And so when you think about that, saying like, yes, this school might not be it, but what are some other options where I can be just as happy and just as successful, And so I think it's managing it more in that way than anything else.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think that, I will, restrain myself from asking you all the questions in the interest of time, but I know everybody's really thankful. We did have a question about you sharing your slides. So I know you said you would be happy to. So yes, you can share your slides later. And thank you so much for coming, Andrea. And thank you so much for speaking on this. This is really important right now, especially.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Our next presenter is the man, the myth, and the legend, I almost feel like he doesn't really even need an introduction because I'm sure so many of you do know him already. But from the Florida Department of Education, the Office of Student Financial Assistance, we have Mr. Pedro Pete Hernandez to give us some updates and to share some information regarding Bright Futures and scholarships. So Pete, the floor is yours, and we are grateful to have you here. Remember, as Allison stated earlier, if you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll make sure to ask at the end of Pete's presentation.
Thank you. And once again, on behalf of the Florida Department of Education, especially the Office of Student Financial Assistance, who administers over $1 billion in the state of Florida, we want to thank every counselor, every participant, every assistant, because it is truly a team effort, but we recognize that you are on the front lines, that you deal face-to-face with the students, and we want to be as beneficial and provide accurate and good information to every counselor out there and every participant. So on behalf of everyone here at the Department of Education, thank you very much for your hard work. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. With that in mind, yes, my name is Pete Hernandez. I'm the Director of Outreach Services here, and I'll be providing today's information. Once again, let us begin. First and foremost, next slide. What are we going to be covering today? So today's information is just going to be a recapture, but pointing out critical information that was provided in the memorandum 2122-04 issued on February 1st of 2022. So you should have this information, but just wanted to review it, make sure you understand it, and to answer any questions that you have in regards to this memorandum. We're going to review Bright Futures evaluations. We're going to review the Florida Financial Aid application. We're going to go over coursework and service hours, college entrance exams, the district and school monitoring and the responsibilities, Bright Futures summer funding, and of course, most importantly, contact information. Who is there specifically to assist your schools? So with that in mind, let us begin. In regards to this memorandum, it was issued once again on February 1st, and it is once again established to make sure that everyone understands that in order to qualify for the Bright Future Scholarship, a majority of the students qualify under meeting the 5 basic criteria, which are to submit a completed Florida Financial Aid application, known as a state application, but most of your students recognize it or know it as the Bright Futures application. And it has to be done by August 31st of 2022 for your senior class or your seniors for the 2022 era. That is the deadline. But once again, we highly, highly recommend that they do it as soon as possible in order to get evaluated, in order to get their evaluations posted to their post-secondary institutions so they can receive funding. If they do not submit that application, that means one of the criteria is missing, therefore they're not going to be evaluated until that application is submitted. Secondly, complete the required coursework by high school graduation. Remember, we take that last transcript that's sent by your institution, and that last final transcript has all the qualifying hours, all the qualifying grades, GPA, and the graduation date, which makes the students eligible. Students also have to achieve the required GPA in the required coursework. Remember, there is a difference between the required GPA for Bright Futures purposes and their overall GPA. We only take into consideration those classes that are specifically for SUS standards of admissions, and that GPA is counted only for Bright Futures evaluation, not the entire GPA. Complete the required number of service hours by high school graduation or by when the school district or counselors have determined that deadline to be at your institution. And finally, achieve the required test exam scores no later than June 30th to 2022. One of the biggest questions this year was, is that going to be extended like it was for the prior 2 classes? As of today, no. That deadline to submit qualifying test scores is June 30th of 2022. Once again, that is beyond high school graduation, but the deadline to submit or sit for those test scores, qualifying test scores, is June 30th. We do recognize that there are additional test dates beyond June 30th, but those will not count for your 2022 high school seniors. Next slide, please. Now, In order to evaluate the Florida Financial Aid Application, or the FFA, all high school seniors should apply and complete a Florida Financial Aid Application. Now, what does that mean? That means that we encourage counselors to have every high school senior fill out a Florida Financial Aid Application. The Florida Financial Aid Application does not require a Social Security number. The student can fill it out with either a Social Security number, a student identification number, or leave that field blank. The system will assign them a pseudo number. This is vitally important because for those students who are either going into the military, those students who are going out of state, or those students who do not have a Social Security number. This allows the students to complete a Florida Financial Aid Application, and if the student returns to the state of Florida or becomes eligible within the next 5 years, traditionally, the student can reinstate their Bright Future Scholarship. For example, if a student goes out of state, goes up to NYU, and they realize that it snows 5 months out of the year, and they want to return back to Florida, if the student did not fill out their Florida Financial Aid Application when they do return to Florida, if they were Bright Future eligible, by not completing this application, they are not going to be able to reinstate their application. Make sure that every student completes it. Now, there are exceptions, 2 exceptions. For students going into military service or immediately going into religious services for 18 months or greater upon high school graduation, for those students, specifically those 2 types of students, that 5-year period extends after their service for military service or after the 18 months or greater for a religious service commitment. Those are the 2 exceptions. But other than that, we encourage all high school students to submit this application. Now, once again, students have until August 31st of their high school senior year, but we encourage them to fill it out as soon as possible. We understand that a lot of students want to complete all the requirements prior to submitting an application, but for Bright Futures purposes, it is just one of the requirements. We are still going to evaluate the classes that they take, the GPA that they receive, the community service hours, all the way up through graduation, but that application is just a requirement. We just want to make sure that they have it submitted and completed. Now, in order for students right now to receive an early evaluation and status notification, also must receive their applications by May 31st of 2022. Once again, that is just for early evaluation. At the end of the semester, once you submit the final transcript as counselors, as school districts, we will then evaluate the student for their final evaluations. And students who meet all the academic requirements but do not apply, once again, will not be eligible for the scholarship, the application. Just like every other requirement, it is a requirement. The student has to submit that information. Next slide. Now, when it comes to coursework and service hours, when you submit the final transcript, we encourage all districts to submit it as soon as possible so we can start processing their final evaluations and therefore post their final evaluations to their account, and also notify their post-secondary institutions whether they're going this summer or whether they're going next fall. So we can want to make sure that as soon as we receive those final transcripts, we start processing those and we start evaluating those, and we once again, we start posting those to those accounts, to those students' account. U.S. counselors have access to the online OT system, which gives you access right now to their evaluations. However, the counselor's evaluation and student evaluation is much different. We will not post it to the student's evaluation final determination until we receive that last transcript or after the early evaluation period. Once again, all service hours, make sure they're whether they're associated with volunteer public service or if they're in an IB program, ACE program, they are included on the transcript because those service hours are required in order to qualify for the Florida Bright Future Scholarship. And if you are using the FAFSA to transmit your transcript, early evaluation address for value for the 2022 high school senior transcript is 2271. Make sure that you have that information in front of you. If you should have any questions in regards to that, at the end of this presentation, I am going to provide you your direct contact for counselors that on our system that assist counselors at your end to make sure all the information is processed correctly. Next slide. Now, when it comes to college entrance exams, it is very important that that all counselors and all students understand the following. OSFA will evaluate students based on the official ACT or SAT test scores that are obtained directly from the two national test companies through the test depository. Now, however, when it comes to PERT exams or PERT scores, those are to be still transmitted within your transcript that is sent to us during the 7th semester and at the end of the 8th semester for final evaluation. We still pick up the PERT exams from the actual transcript. The other test score, SAT, ACT test score, once again, we receive that through our test depository. And how do we receive it to our test depository? That means that every student must request their official single sitting test score to be sent to one of the Florida public universities, excluding Florida Polytechnic universities. Once again, let me repeat that and how that impacts your student. If you have students, say you're a counselor in Lake Mary Prep, and your students, one of the students going to UCF, the other student is going to Valencia or Seminole State College. Both of those students must send their qualifying SAT or SAT test scores to University of Central Florida or one of the public state universities in order for us to receive it via the test depository. That's how we match it up to the transcript, to the Florida financial aid application, and provide that student an evaluation. Once again, they have to send it to at least one of them. That is, and those state public universities are the University of West Florida, Florida State, Florida A&M, University of North Florida, University of Florida, University of Central Florida, University of South Florida, Florida Atlantic University, Florida International University, Florida Southwest State University, and New College. There is one exception. Florida Polytechnic University does not participate in the program. So if your students are going to that institution, make sure that they send their test scores to UCF or one of the other participating universities. Now, does that mean that Florida Polytechnic University is not a valid school? Absolutely not. It is one of the state public universities, but they don't participate in that program. So therefore, we will not get test score evaluations for students sending their test score to that institution. Now, just want to make sure that you understand when it comes to test scores, they need to send it to each one of us. Another thing that has come up recently with a lot of your seniors and going forward is that the testing agencies are providing super scores. We at the Florida Department of Education also do super scores and take that methodology into consideration when evaluating your students. However, we are going to need every sitting or every time that the student took their test score. Unlike the agencies now, that they will provide a super score with the latest test that they've taken. Now, if students misunderstand or need to be communicated that super score that the testing agencies are providing, that is not what we're picking up. We need to have every test score, and therefore we do the super scoring on our end. But once again, we need to have every test that the student has taken. And once again, how we receive that is by sending those tests, whether the one they're about to take or the previous test, have them sent to, once again, one of the public state universities, with the exception of Florida Polytechnic University. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, please contact us. We'll be more than happy to assist you with that. But want to make sure that those students, counselors understand that is the process by how we receive those test scores. And final evaluations for 2022 seniors will only be considered, once again, through the June 30th, 2022 testing date. Now, can and may it change? Yes, but at this date, as of this date, that deadline for test scores has not changed. Next slide. Now, when it comes to the districts and school monitoring and its responsibilities, Florida statutes require that each district monitor their students and provide the progress through evaluation process. You have the ability to provide the OT screens. And once again, it is district's responsibility and school's responsibility to provide students in 11th and 12th grade an accurate Bright Futures evaluation report and their GPA for Bright Futures purposes and their overall GPA. Once again, make sure that that is being provided and it is communicated that when it comes to Bright Futures, their GPA is a specific GPA based on certain coursework, whereas not their overall GPA, that it encapsulates all grades and all classes that the student has taken as part of their high school curriculum. Next slide. Now, the Florida legislation has expanded the Florida Academic Scholars, Florida Medallion Scholars during and availability to provide summer funding. What does that mean? That funding is available if the post-secondary allows a student to enroll as a degree-seeking student during the summer term. What does that mean? That the student has to be degree-seeking. Now, does that have to be his final and end-all institution? No, but as part of the Bright Futures requirement, the students have to be degree-seeking and take non-remedial classes to qualify for Bright Futures funding. In the summer, like every other semester, fall and spring, Bright Futures is triggered by the student taking at least 6 credit hours per semester. That is the minimum the student can take to start receiving Florida Bright Futures funding. The equivalent clock hour amount is done for the Go See on Go CO Cape, but those scholarships, the Go See on Go CO Cape, do not fund during the summer. Please understand that. There is a difference between the Florida Academic and Florida Medallion, which do provide summer funding, and the Go See on Go CO Cape that do not provide summer funding for students. Make sure that is also communicated to students, and we also communicate to them once they are become eligible. We provide that information to them. Next slide. Now, why is it vitally important? It is vitally important that we provide and get accurate information. So therefore, we have provided you our customer service number with option 4, which is strictly for high school counselors. But we also want to provide you the direct contact of Timberly Johnson and Leroy Shelton. This is their direct phone number, and this is their direct email. If you are a counselor at a private high school, Beverly Latham is your primary contact. This is her personal direct phone line and her email address. Now, why are we providing this information? It is vitally important that when it comes to updating and accessing correct information, when the schools provided your 7th semester, that means at the end of the fall term, you provided a transcript to us. And that is a transcript that we have on file. Now, that transcript has a student's name, social security number, student ID number, all of the great demographic information, and the underlying transcript with all the classes that they've taken. If you are then going to process their 8th semester or final transcript, and if there are inconsistencies with the spelling, with the date of birth, with the first or last name of the student, with their social security number, that information has to be changed by contacting these individuals prior to sending any updated transcripts. Because if you do not contact these individuals and have that information corrected prior to you sending an updated transcript, that updated transcript is going to error off and it's not going to upload, and therefore not causing the student to provide good information for their evaluation. So once again, if you are trying to update a student's contact information, that means demographic information, name, date of birth, that kind of information needs to, once again, can be communicated to your corresponding contact at our office so they could document it, change it. So therefore, when you send additional transcripts via batch environment or individual transcripts, they do not error off. Because a lot of those counselors, we don't want to assume or mistakenly think that by providing just an additional transcript with updated information is going to overlay or update the information that we have from 7th semester. So just make sure that we have, and you guys can communicate that information to us directly with these following individuals so that information gets updated, gets uploaded correctly in a timely manner for students to, once again, get their evaluations in a timely manner, and their information gets posted to their accounts and to their post-secondary institution. Next slide. Once again, we have 3 awards with the Bright Future Scholarship Program: the Florida Academic, Florida Medallion, Gold Seal, and Gold Seal Vocational Scholarships. Once again, all have different criteria, but remember, the student can only qualify for one level of the scholarship, and that is established at their high school graduation or after their final transcript. So if a student wants to qualify for the Florida Academic, but then changes their mind and wants to study vocational institution or a vocational career, they cannot transfer from one to another. Just want to make sure that they understand. Next slide. As you can see, we provide you a little breakdown of scholarship recipients throughout the years. As you can see, it varies depending on a lot of great information that we have, a lot of your students, but the scholarship is once again a very, very beneficial scholarship, and we highly, highly encourage all students to try to qualify as soon as possible. Next slide. Once again, our website, we highly, highly encourage you as counselors to have this website on your informational page. And specifically, if you look on the right-hand side, you're going to see the Bright Futures Scholarship. It's the third one down. Link that, because if you click on that Bright Futures Scholarship link, you're going to come to the Bright Futures Student Handbook, Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3. That is where we post all updated information. So if you haven't already, if you haven't done so, please link the actual link and not actually have information that's printed available, because we do update that Bright Future Student Handbook, and we do it online. So I want to make sure that you have that information readily available. Next slide. On the website, on the footers for our website, we have a lot of great information. We want to point out that reports, we have their end of year reports, specifically the Bright Future statistical reports. We have a lot of great information if you want to do a little research on the overall program when it comes to Bright Futures. Next slide. Once again, and as counselors, if you log in from the main site, you're going to have access to a lot of great information, all the memorandums that we talked about, a lot of great information, including the data sharing agreement if your district participates, that you're going to have access to that. Once again, but if you click on the Bright Futures link, then on the upper right-hand side, you're going to see the OTs link, which gives you the actual evaluation for every one of your students. Next slide. And this is my contact information. If you have any question, any concern whatsoever, these slides are going to be provided to you, but I am your dedicated representative. It is my sole responsibility to assist, and it is my honor and my pleasure to assist you once again, because you are on the cutting edge. And if you have any questions or concerns, do not hesitate to pick up the phone, contact me. I am there to assist you. Once again, our toll-free number is 1-888-827-2004. Option 4 is for those dedicated counselor representatives. Option 5 also rings directly to me, but I like to give everybody my direct contact information, which is also linked to my cell phone. And I am available just like you guys are, not from 8 to 5, but 24/7, because you guys work hard and I'm always there to assist you and provide information. And if I do not answer, or if I do not follow up within 24 hours, please contact me again, and I will apologize for not responding sooner. And that is my commitment to every one of you guys. Now I would like to open it up to questions or concerns that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pete. And I will say, I can agree with you always being available. Whenever I know I call personally, you always answer or respond. So thank you for that. You do have several questions in the chat and Q&A. And if you all think of questions, go ahead and just put them in the chat and we'll be sure to ask. The first question is, if a non-US eligible student is in the process of becoming a citizen, do they have the 5 years to do so?
Yes. So say if a student is presently in the process of becoming an eligible non-citizen or a citizen for financial aid purposes, if the student, once again, a high school senior, if they meet all the requirements, and one of the requirements is the Florida financial aid application, they submit it. If they have 5 years from high school graduation, if they, once again, obtain eligible non-citizen or citizenship status, they can reinstate their Florida Bright Future Scholarship and apply it for the remaining of the period that they have within those 5 years after high school graduation.
Thank you. Next question. What is the percentage of students you accept with a super score over a student with a perfect score?
The Florida Bright Futures is a merit-based scholarship. If you meet all the qualifications, you receive that scholarship. There is no one, we're not choosing one over another. If you meet the requirements, you qualify for that scholarship, whether at the Florida Academic, Florida Medallion, or Go Seal Vocational Scholarship levels. We do not quantify scores. As long as you meet the requirements, you become eligible for that scholarship. Now, eligibility for the scholarship is established after high school graduation, but then the student has to meet the renewal requirements every single year to renew that scholarship.
All right, next question. Are there any plans to allow for electronic submission of transcripts for private schools, similar to FAFSA, directly from their student information systems?
Definitely. It is a question that we do acknowledge, and we do have that information that it is brought to us on a yearly basis. I know it is evaluated on our system, but the person that would quantify you or could answer you more on where that specifically is or the options of it would be Beverly, your contact that was provided earlier in the presentation for private schools.
When will students get their first evaluation letter?
Definitely. Remember, if it's for early evaluations, once again, we start evaluating in early March. That means if the student met absolutely everything by their end of the fall semester, they would receive those. Once again, but if the student is still working on hours or still hasn't submitted the application or whatever, any of the 5 criteria that they're missing or any other qualifications, we start, as soon as we receive that final transcript with the student's graduation date, confirmation with the graduation date, and provide that final evaluation based on that final transcript, we start doing it 3 to 4 weeks after that. We start posting their information.
If a student is scheduled to start college this summer, are they eligible for Bright Futures?
Yes, once again, if a student is Bright Futures eligible upon graduation, they can receive summer funding if they enroll as a degree-seeking student and enroll as for more than 6 credit hours at that institution.
Will additional IB coursework be considered by your board to meet Bright Futures requirements by subject to align with the IB groups?
Yes, and we do outline that in our Bright Future Student Handbook, chapter 1, page 3 and 4 outlines the actual qualifications under IB and additional IB's curriculum that the student can meet. But that also drives me to a very, very important point. When it comes to your students, if your students are in an IB program, and there's a distinct difference between an IB curriculum and an IB diploma. Mm-hmm. Students that meet and qualify and receive an IB diploma are exempt from, or an ACE diploma are exempt from the qualifying test scores. But if the student is in an IB or an ACE curriculum but does not receive the diploma, they have to have those qualifying test scores. It is a significant difference. Now, for those students who receive an IB or an ACE diploma, those students, we are going to receive directly from those institutions a list of those students who received the diploma. Even though it can be they have proof, but we at the Department of Education receive that list in early to late July, and we are processing that early to late August at the earliest. Now, does that mean that those students with an IB or an ACE diploma do not qualify for Bright Futures? Absolutely not. But because of that timing issue, that some students who graduated in 2022 and their evaluation has not been posted because we have not received that list or provided the evaluation, those students could enroll in college at a university or a technical center and not receive funding because their evaluation has not been processed. We encourage those students to notify their financial aid offices at their post-secondary institutions to let them know and to make arrangements so they will not be dropped from classes or they're now incur late fees, but let them know what is going on, that there are ACE diploma possible recipients and that the Bright Futures evaluation should be shortly coming thereafter. Because of the timing issue, those students might not receive their evaluations, once again, until mid to late July or possibly even August, when the post-secondary institution has already begun with their class schedules.
Next question. It seems like it's more of a clarifying question.
Absolutely.
If a student only applies to University of Florida, FSU, and FAU, all self-reporting test score universities, should we encourage them to also order and send an official school report to at least one of them before March for early evaluation? Is this correct?
All right, and this is a very good question and good for clarification. Remember, those institutions on the academic side are self-reporting, but for Bright Futures, it's a different thing. This is their financial aid. This is for Bright Futures. We encourage them to send them to at least one. So they don't have to, if the student is looking at 3 institutions for admissions, that's perfectly fine. They could self-report to those institutions, their SAT, ACT scores. But for Bright Futures purposes, they have to send us every sitting of either the SAT or ACT so we could super score it, but we'll provide that information to whoever the student finally accepts and goes to. They need to change that on their Florida financial aid application on their profile to indicate their school of choice, and we'll send the final results or the final posting of eligibility or not eligibility to that institution.
Okay, and just to add on to that, because I see a question that just came in, can you please clarify Florida Polytechnic's relationship with Bright Futures? Do they
Yes.
accept Bright Futures? I just wasn't clear
Yes.
and want clarification.
Yes, Florida Polytechnical is a very good school, one of our state universities. However, if students were to send their Bright Futures test scores to that institution, they may receive it on the academic side, but we're not receiving it for Bright Futures evaluation. They're not depositing those test scores into our test depository. Therefore, we can't evaluate your student. That school is a very good school, is a traditional school, is a STEM school, accredited school, nothing wrong with it. But they do not participate in the test depository. So therefore, we cannot receive those test scores for students who are going either to that institution or to other institutions. So list any other school besides Florida Polytechnic for Bright Futures purposes.
And that's even if they're not interested in that other school, correct, Pete? Just to make sure they get it sent.
That is correct.
Okay. Have there been any rumblings about potential changes to the requirements from the legislature like last year? Also, can you discuss how Bright Futures works with dual enrollment students who have an AA or close to earning an AA?
Correct. In regards to the proposed legislation, we do not comment on any pending legislation, but know that every legislative session, anything can and might change within Bright Futures requirement, test scores, and funding. Everything is available because it is a legislatively mandated scholarship. We just administer it. With that set in mind, can it change? Will it change? We have to wait at the end of the legislative session where we'll provide the counselors and the students an updated score. But as far as qualifying items, we have provided both for this year's high school seniors. That information will not change. We have provided information for next year's juniors, which are this year's juniors, which are next year's seniors, testing score requirements so they can meet those testing score requirements so they could qualify. Now, that set in mind, once again, Florida Bright Futures, just like every other state scholarship and grant, is legislatively mandated and administered by our office. So can it change? Could it change? Might it change? Yes. But at the same time, we are already established the criteria to meet Bright Futures eligibility. Now, when it comes to a student, say a student graduates high school and receives their AA at the same time. In order to receive Bright Futures funding, remember, a student has to enroll at a post-secondary institution as a degree-seeking student. So if the student receives their AA and goes back to a state college and is not enrolled as a degree seeking student because they already have their AA, that could be an issue when it comes to Bright Futures funding. Bright Futures funding has to be, once again, awarded to students who are in a post-secondary institution as a degree seeking student. So as long as they are a degree seeking student, now could they be in a 4-year program? Absolutely. But when they enroll at a state college, state university, or public institution, as long as they are a degree seeking student, they are eligible. Now, upon high school graduation, whether they have 0 hours, 60 hours already, the student is granted be granted up to 120 credit hours towards their first baccalaureate degree. Now, that student that graduates with 60 hours is only going to receive funding for another 60 hours until they meet their first baccalaureate degree. That student will then have 60 hours of additional unfunded hours. That student can go on to graduate school, and their graduate school, the first semester of graduate studies, will be covered under the Bright Future Scholarship Program, but at the undergraduate level, just their first semester. Just like any other student, if within 5 years they get their baccalaureate degree and enroll in graduate school, and then if they have enough hours remaining, their first semester of graduate studies can be covered at the undergraduate level if they have hours remaining.
Okay, and it seems like we have a few that would like further clarification on Florida Poly. I think it's throwing them off that they're not in the repository. So they just wanted a little clarification on that. Do they not give the monetary award for Bright Futures, or do they just would like more clarification?
Yes. Okay. Florida Polytechnical is a good school, is a valid school. It participates in the Florida Bright Futures, participates in federal funding. All that information for that Polytechnical is valid. The only thing that is that they do not participate is in the test depository. So if a high school student graduates, sends their test scores to Florida Polytechnical on their SAT, ACT, we're not going to receive it in the test depository. Therefore, we're not going to evaluate them for Florida Bright Futures. That student, along with any other student, needs to send it to UCF, USF. Therefore, it will hit the test depository. We will provide evaluation. We will provide funding if the student goes to Florida Polytechnical under the Florida Bright Future Scholarship. The only thing that it is not doing is they do not participate in the test depository. Therefore, we cannot, if a student just solely sends it to Florida Polytechnical University, we do not receive that test score in the test depository, or we cannot evaluate students for Bright Futures because we don't see those test scores.
Thank you. So just to recap, because I can see how that is a little confusing. It doesn't have anything to do with Florida Polytech. We reiterated they're an excellent school. However, they don't participate. So if the student sends it to Florida Poly only, it will not be received. So they would just need to make sure, as Pete stated, to tack on another institution that does participate to ensure that those scores are received on behalf of Bright Futures. Thank you, Pete. Another question regarding AA degree students. 120 hours toward undergraduate degree. If they have 60 already, could they use Bright Futures toward a double major or a BS? You said first degree, so I just want to double check for clarification.
That is correct. Bright Futures is going to fund that student towards up to 120 credit hours towards their first baccalaureate degree. If they have double majors, or that's completely up to them. If they take classes outside their major and exhaust 120 hours before they get their first baccalaureate degree, that once again is a student's responsibility to make sure that they understand that Bright Futures is going to only fund up to 120 credit hours towards their baccalaureate degree or their first undergraduate degree. Now, they can participate and have multiple majors. That's perfectly fine. One thing that is coming up is the fact that what if a student has or wants to do double majors or is enrolled in a major or a degree that requires more than 120 credit hours? If that is the case, on our student handbook on chapter 2, there is an extended form, but that is only for students who are enrolled in a major or in a degree that requires more than 120 credit hours. But any other person that is Bright Futures student or recipient is only going to be funded up to 120 credit hours towards their first baccalaureate degree.
Just to double check, the weighted GPA is only for the 16 high school courses needed for eligibility, or is there information on how this is calculated?
Right. Our student handbook has all that information on it. We update depending on the course work that is, we have that information on our student handbook, how much it is weighted for just those specific classes that are SUS determinant classes or Bright Futures eligible classes. We have that in our student handbook. We also have it in our Bright Futures course table, all the courses that do count and that are weighted for Bright Futures GPA evaluations.
They have a transcript question, Pete. Do the school districts upload transcript information, test scores, GPA, community service hours periodically throughout the school year to Bright Futures?
Yes, most school districts and most schools process one after the fall semester, one after the spring semester, and possibly one in the summer. But can schools constantly upload transcripts or corrected transcripts? Absolutely. But once again, if your district, if your school is uploading a transcript because they need to correct a student's name spelling, name correction, inversion of the name, first name, last name, date of birth, any of those demographic information, contact your dedicated OSFA representative, school counselor representative to correct that so the updated transcript that gets sent uploads correctly and is part of the overall file so the student can be evaluated.
Okay, last question. I would like more information on how the fine art classes are evaluated. For example, advanced dance.
Remember, for Bright Futures purposes, it is only the 4 core academic classes when it comes to Bright Futures classes. That means 4 math classes, 4 English classes, 3 social science, 3 biological science, and 2 consecutive world languages. That is the core class requirement for Bright Futures purposes. Electives such as dance do not come into calculation for Bright Futures purposes.
Thank you. Such awesome questions and great discussion. Pete, we truly appreciate you providing this information and also the contacts as well. So we appreciate your time and energy, and thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure. And once again, we thank you for the work that you do.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Allison to introduce our final guest speaker today. Really quick, just take a stretch break. Open up those arms wide. Bring it out front. Yes, yes. And I'm going to turn it over to Allison to introduce Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Monique. Can you make sure that Sarah is a co-host while I introduce her? Thank you. All right. Some of you might know that I have a side hustle as a journalist. I write for the Today Show and for NBC News and other outlets covering parenting, even though I am a parent and I don't do it that well still, and also college admissions and teenagers. And one of my very favorite sources when I'm writing a story, especially about mental health and teenagers, which I seem to be writing a lot of lately, is Dr. Sarah Spinagle, Sarah Kane Spinagle. So I am so excited to have Sarah speak to us today. She is not from Florida. She's from Ohio. So she's coming in hot from Ohio. And I think you're going to find her really great. Her experience. Dr. Sarah Kane Spinagle is a practicing licensed clinical psychologist and works with children and adolescents in the state of Ohio. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan and earned her PhD in clinical psychology from Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Spinagle has extensive experience working with children, adolescents, young adults, and families. She was the consulting psychologist at University School in Shaker Heights for almost a decade. Currently, she is the consulting psychologist at Hathaway Brown School, as well as the staff psychologist for the Rainbow Babies and Children Autism Diagnostic Clinic. Dr. Spinagle is faculty at Case Western Reserve University's Department of Psychological Sciences and Case Medical School Department of Pediatrics, as well as faculty associate in the Schubert Center for Child Studies. Thank you so much for being here today. Monique, you need to let Sarah add her video. She can't.
I think I just did it, and hopefully everybody
Got
can
it.
see me. Yeah,
I was gonna say, I thought I made you co-hostess.
I know it.
I know.
Hostess with the mostest, but then it wouldn't let me do my thing. so,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many of us does it take to operate Zoom? It's all of us, right? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Spinagle.
Yep. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be together. Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Monique. And Pete, you did a great job. And so today I am coming to you, as Allison said, from Cleveland. We have a couple more inches of snow, but by this weekend, it's supposed to be 60. So really unpredictable and crazy. But I would like to spend this next time with you to be really realistic and practical, hopefully, about how to kind of recharge yourself and get that relationship back with within yourself, with colleagues and students. So definitely put things into the chat. If I can catch them, I will answer them in the moment. I'm seeing a Hathaway Brown blazer, class of 85 just wrote. So it is a great place. It is nice to see you, Heather. And so I will try to catch it in the chat as I go. And then we'll have time at the end for questions, but definitely happy to make it conversational. And I am coming to you also in a sweatshirt and hair wet, if that tells you, if that helps you understand my adaptive functioning right now. So Monique, if you could, you can go through my slides, or am I supposed to do it? What's best? Okay, perfect. So there is me. So Allison gave you my kind of professional overview that's from my website, but probably the most important, most time consuming, most frustrating, all of those things that I do with my time is I am a mom to these two boys. So Matthew is just turned 13 and Benjamin is 10. So they keep me really busy. That was us at Mackinac Island in recent years, because that's where we go in the summer. So busy psychologist with a private practice and working in higher education, and then in the primary schools, and then spending time with my own kids. So I'm happy to also answer questions about my career, my practice, anything that would be helpful for you as professionals. So next slide. Okay. So as I started to say, I'd love to call this what it is, right? It is always a really, really tough job to be in the schools. It is. And people don't really understand it until they are in a school, that it is a very fulfilling and taxing job all at one time. And each school, I learned a long time from a Catholic nun when I was talking to her about that each school is a living being. It takes on its own humanity. And so I'd love to be able to kind of call this what it is and to have a very real conversation today. And then hopefully you walk away with some practical strategies again for that, either connecting for the first time or reconnecting. And there, you'll see on the slides, there's sometimes 15 things suggested. If you walk away with one at the end of the hour, then we'll call it an accomplishment. So, because it has to be a fit for you. So let's get started. Next slide. So when I did this variation of this presentation 2 years ago, it was like, it's okay if quarantined at home has you feeling like this. So I changed it this week to it's okay if working in a school has you feeling like this. And I said, that's a real photo of me. So it is a very emotion-laden occupation, and it is a challenge to be in the school, and it is a challenge to be in the school during a pandemic. We're all working with kids who their containers are full. They've had enough of the pandemic. So I think we can all relate to days of feeling overwhelmed, guilty, wondering about the culture of our school, being depleted, being recharged, caught between wanting to do all these great ideas and just actually not having the time or energy in which to do it. So hopefully I'm not the only one feeling that way, because misery loves company, but I think we're all at the end of our resources at this point. So that's an actual picture of me in real time. All right, next slide. So I'm thinking my video is over top, but I think, yep, reconnecting with yourself was up first. So again, I think we spend a lot of time making sure that others are cared for, and we don't always follow our own advice or figure out what actually works for us. I think it's the nature of the jobs that we are in. So again, hoping that we can come up with a list of some that make sense, some strategies that make sense, some that are practical. Maybe it's a reminder, maybe it's a new idea for you, and you can come up with something that will make sense for you. So next slide. Yeah, so off to the left, right, is like, if you think about like Maslow's triangle of needs, or looking at it in this format, right? We have our physical needs, we have our emotional needs, we have the environmental pressures and environmental demands. Some of us are connected or disconnected spiritually. We have our intellectual tax, social things that, you know, I am a big fan of canceled plans. I love when people cancel plans and then I don't have to go out and about sometimes. It's like a total gift. So, but at the same time, I know that the way that I recharge is I'm a really social person. So there's that social piece, occupational, why we're here today, right? Us as mental health advocates in the school. And there's the financial realities, and then everything else that's very practically on our mind. So what are some good themes, statements to remind ourselves about as we go through this? So, and this has been, I think, is a constant in the pandemic. These have been even more important to think through, but trading that guilt for grace, right? I think I go to bed at night thinking about all the things I have not done, whether it's I didn't get back to that kid, I didn't get to my own kid, I didn't do this, I should have done that. Allowing for some grace, right? So trading some guilt for grace. If you want good grace resources or any of these really resources, Brene Brown stuff always makes me go like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I should have a little more grace, accept my vulnerability. So I think trading guilt for grace is a good thing. And thinking about like not, and I talk to parents about doing this to kids, like no, saying no is a really hard thing to do, and hearing no is a really triggering word. So thinking about how you can say yes to other pieces, right? Even if it's saying yes to yourself. So it's kind of understanding the difference between what we've kind of been trained up to see as selfishness versus having self-interest, which is a beautiful thing, right? So instead of saying, I'm going to say no to doing that right now, I'm saying yes to sleep, or I'm saying yes to a happy hour. It's not that you're saying no to something else. You're saying something yes to yourself. Permission to feel. Mark Brackett's work is around just allowing yourself to feel all of these pieces and parts of living in a pandemic, working in a school. So his work is also good. You can follow him on Facebook. His books are good. That social connectedness piece, right? So I joked about, I love canceled plans, which is an accurate statement, but I also desire this kind of like social connectedness. And when I don't feel connected, I feel on the out, and the pandemic has reduced. The state of Florida, I think, is a little bit different, but in general, there's been a reduction in social connectedness. Actively managing stress. And I have some examples of that on other slides, how to actively do that. And looking for things that how we're managing our stress that maybe aren't as healthy, right? So I have most certainly, the minute my eyes open, I'm looking at Facebook, and there's some really heavy, yucky stuff on there that feels overwhelming or out of my control. So it allows me to zone out, which is great, but does it fill me with other pieces that maybe it's not the best healthy distraction? Maybe it's impacting my sleep. Thinking through how you're distracting yourself, and if it's additive or it's running interference for you, is thoughtful. The rhythm and routine, right? So I am a really big fan, no matter if I'm working with students, families, thinking about myself, find your rhythm and routine. If you are out of your rhythm and routine and it doesn't feel like a one-off because March is really awful and there's a lot to do, And it's just that, or should we be really working to get back to rhythm and routine? How can we reset? The practice of gratitude, again, a tremendous kind of act to do is to be grateful, intentionally grateful. Can be a small thing. You can just do, I feel grateful for this, and you can get a lot of psychological return. Last but not least is seeking help, right? When do you need to seek help? And I believe my next slide gets at that a little bit more. Yeah. So, oh, wait, maybe one more, and then can I double back? I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, perfect. I have them a little bit out of order. But so how do we think about preventing things, right? What on that list we just read, and I'll double back to some practical strategies. How can we prevent things? How do we head things off at the pass? What do we need to shift and change, adjust? How do we cope? How do we know when we need to recover, right? Aware, balance, committing to those things. The seeking help, right? Like, how you doing? Am I doing okay? I had a grad school professor that would ask us every week, like, how you floating? Right? Are you totally underwater? Do you have a toe up? Are you bobbing? Are you with a cement block on the bottom? Are you living the life at the top of the water? Where are you? Right? So some type of gradient to say, where am I doing? How am I doing? Where can I get help? And is it on that very practical list? Do I need a colleague? Do I need my own one-on-one support? So how do you get help when the very practical strategies aren't allowing you to head something off, cope in the moment, recover, when you need to commit some other to some other resources? Can we double back real quick? Yeah, okay. So practical strategies. Again, I know a lot of these are might not be practical for you, right? Or you've tried them and they don't work for you, or hopefully it's a reminder and you can go back to it. So practical strategies around kind of reducing burnout and stress and increasing connectedness to yourself and maybe to another, depending on the strategy. So talking about it, right? This exact moment should in and of itself be helpful, right? How can we talk about this? And there's kind of an adage, if you can name it, you can tame it, right? So if you can call it disconnectedness, you can call it stress, you can call it burnout, you can call it worry, you can call it anxiety. I work with kids a lot that actually name their stress or worry, give it a name. So if you can name it, you can tame it, right? So call it what it is, right? What you're experiencing. Thinking about what are reasonable work goals. I know that your load is totally unreasonable. I know that. I work in schools a lot as a consultant, and I know that your work is insurmountable and you're well-intentioned and it is a tremendous load. What can you do that is a reasonable work goal so that you can actually stick to it? How do you build in a micro break? How do you just schedule it in and figure that out? Is that a reality for you? Watching your own like shoulds, oughts, and musts, right? Like a CBT principle. What am I feeling like I need to do? I should do it. I must do that aren't real, right? Pay attention to your own language. Transitional routines. So I think one of the hardest things that I face as a professional is like that switch. So if I run out of a school and I go pick up my own kids at school, I'm a mess. I'm not a great mom, and I probably then probably take a ding professionally. But if I can get into that pickup line with 5 minutes to sit and again, mindlessly look at my phone, call my mom, take a breather, I'm a little bit better, right? If I actively code switch instead of having to code switch, then I do a little bit better, right? So what's that transitional routine that can mark some good distinctions between that day and that stress? Finding quiet spaces in the school. I know they don't really exist, but if you can find them, watching again that base your own triangle. So how can you stay hydrated? What are you eating during the day? Do you have any time for movement? How's your sleep? Those kind of bare bones give you a lot of return, no matter if you're 4, 40, or 60. I am a big fan of just in general, really paying attention to your basic needs of sleep and healthy fuel and hydration can go a really long way to taking care of yourself. So next slide. Yeah, perfect. So that was on how to kind of connect for yourself. Maybe you can look at that and come up with one thing that can be built in. Maybe you practice one now in this kind of March, which I feel like doesn't exist. There's so much going on. It's like the longest, shortest month. you can get through March, what are these strategies can you put in then April and May, and then reboot and think about for your next school year? What's practical, right? For connecting to yourself. Now it's about connecting and or reconnecting with colleagues, how to do that. Next slide. So, this one can be tricky, because I at least find it to be tricky, because again, that school has a lot of its own humanity, right? It has its own culture, its own being. There's certain constraints put in it by, would you really be friends with everybody around you if they weren't in your same building, right? Probably not. So there's lots that go into being in a school and being a colleague. But so hopefully these serve as good reminders. I read something the other day about kind of the teacher fallout, and it was like, do I not like teaching? Do I not like my school? Do I not like, right? What is it? So it's about answering that question, having somewhat of a good answer to it, and then deciding how to connect or plant your feet kind of where you are. So teaching and learning from each other. There's lots of times when I've heard another colleague say something even years ago, and then I take it as my own, right? It's a really great strategy. Oh, hold on. This one says, can you paste the link into the chat? Oh, at the bottom. Yeah. Okay. Maybe someone can do that for me. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. None of this, I got to tell you, most of these were from those, like from online. Allison was teasing me earlier about my ability to use Google, which is strong. So, collaborate on events or services, right? You'll see in some of your connection with students, right? Would doing the school play be additive to you? And is that a way to meet other colleagues? Is there a food drive? Is there a soup kitchen? Is it coaching a sport? Is it running student council? Is it an actual character ed event for a kid that you could collaborate with a like-minded colleague or an unlike-minded colleague, and maybe you figure it out? Kind of a sharing what works, right? You're in those grade level team meetings, listening, talking about what works, connecting with the teacher. I find teachers to just be extraordinary about how they do things kind of in that first aid, frontline support. What's working, right? That's a great way to connect. Thinking about being part of a social network or a blog. I know Allison will do different things on Facebook, run groups, right? How can you kind of connect socially given that new landscape? Scheduling get-together. So I often, when I'm consulting with a school, will host like something on my patio and have people just come as I get to know colleagues and get a feel for those teachers and what makes them tick and what's their style and what they need from me. So I know the pandemic dampens that a bit, but get-togethers are great. And if maybe you don't want to go to the one scheduled, maybe you catch the next one. So collaboration, door open is huge, that you can have an open door whenever possible. We are so I'm either hold like up somewhere or I am running my tail off when I am in a school. Door open goes a long way. People pop in. Time for chatting. So, and again, thinking about if that's a recharger for you or a depleter, but that time for chatting and being trustworthy. I mean, plain and simple, don't be a schmuck, right? So people don't like to hang out with schmucks, so don't be a schmuck. So be as trustworthy as you can be. It goes a long way. Some of my closest friends are ones that we had great trust with within a school, and we've made a connection and maintained it. So your disposition and working well with others goes a long way. Again, maybe not a malleable thing for you, but does bode well over time. So thank you for copying the link. And then next slide. Okay, so, this is kind of an extension of that other slide, but how do you ask questions, right? No one likes the person in the meeting that takes up the meeting too long and asks a ton of questions, right? So being realistic, you want to be the right amount of question asker, right? How can you praise another, right? If someone puts up a cool bulletin board or runs the food drive or, oh, I don't know why it doesn't work. I don't know. Everything was pretty much on that slide. So I don't think you're missing much. I wasn't very novel on that slide. Oh, someone else found it. I was going to say it was pretty prevalent list online. So when you can praise a colleague, negativity is tricky. And Allison and I talked about this a little bit last week when we were talking this through. Some of my greatest friends have been made around a conference room in a school looking at each other like this is totally crazy, right? And I think this is crazy and I want to be negative about it. So negativity is good in the right amount because you can make connection over shared, we want to change this, right? This is kind of crazy. Let's do something about it. Too much negativity boils over and then everything's right? And meh. So thinking about having the right amount of kind of view on things and shared view. Open to new ideas. You might not love it, but can you give it a whirl? Can you approximate towards a new idea? Having an understanding about diversity in the workplace, having your understanding of your own views around diversity, engaging in those really somewhat uncomfortable conversations that push our boundaries is a way to grow. Flexibility, adaptability, sharing appropriate things about yourself, right? You might share that you're a college football fan like myself, or that you have a dog like myself. And other people might be like, oh my God, I'm such a dog person. Or you might get a rival comment amongst the Florida schools, right? But sharing something where a connection is made and doing your part. It's like the trustworthy component. People are paying attention on who's pulling their weight in the school, and you have a lot of weight to pull, but doing your part means a lot to colleagues. Next slide. Reconnecting with students. So there is nothing that I enjoy more probably, and it's why all of us got into the work that we do to connect with students. We know that academic success, their social success, their recovery from things that life has handed to them are really contingent on connection. We know that that can be a real game changer, even outside of what practical strategies we offer to a student. We know that that connection is key. So let's talk about or remind ourselves of ways to connect. So next slide. Okay. So reconnecting or connecting with students, right? So kind of some simple strategies. Some of these, again, found online. A lot of these have been what I've seen within the independent schools in Ohio that have led to some success, right? So collecting personal index cards or information sheets, right? I worked with a school counselor who would, I don't see it on the slide, it must be on the next one, do like a survey, a Google Doc to start the year. I know it's a huge caseload, so you might get a lot of return, but collecting information from parents and teachers. If you know that Joe Schmo plays baseball, write it on a card. Keep track of it. You see that kid again, you ask him how baseball is doing. Smile and your overall disposition. Kids read that from a mile away. Students read that a mile away, right? So how to just, again, fake it almost until you make it if you're having a bad day. How can you engage and or share that you too are having a bad day and what you're going to do about it, right? That connection is important. Saying good morning, eye contact, acknowledging the students. Maybe the school where my boys are at and with the school where I consult, there's a teacher out there at pick up, drop off, volunteering to do it, even if it's once a month, right? If that is manageable, how can you be there to greet students? How can you, when they're going into assembly, be the one that stands at the door, right? So you lay eyes on those kids. Handshakes, high fives, how are you? Hellos, secret symbols, right? Like I have in the last one, a cueing signal with some students. How you doing in the hallway, right? Some of my kids are giving me thumbs up, sideways thumb, right? We don't even have to talk. We're connecting in that way. Time to relationship build, right? Finding 2 minutes to pop into a classroom and say, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to see everybody's faces. That's it. Try to pop into the classroom. Notes of appreciation also go a long way with kids. So I had a 4th grader give me a Valentine. I set it on my desk as a reminder. A little bit ago, I dropped a note in her desk just saying hi, Dr. Spanigal. So it doesn't even have to be noting something about them, just saying hi. If you've seen something, an observation, a time that they included someone, a time that they kept trying out for something, they completed something you see in the hallway, any type of note of appreciation of what they're working so hard to do every day, holding it together, helps you connect or reconnect. Next slide. Again, so some other ideas, again, building off the last slide, your door open, playing their music, or you pop in and you're managing like a recess, like a downtime after lunch or something, right? Can you have music on Spotify and within reason? Being a chaperone, if there is an event to do that. Again, that kind of noticing, right? And there's a big difference. I talk a lot with teachers about noticing versus judging, right? How can you notice something about a kid? How can you sponsor something, call home, communicate with them, right? Letting them know they are noticed and seen goes above and beyond a bulletin board. It just does. Eating lunch with them when you can, noticing if they haven't been around and saying it to them, showing up at events. If there's a baseball thing right after school, maybe go for an inning, right? How can you be present in a certain way? The thank you center or a rake board. So we have a rake board for random act of kindness everywhere because it's a community program in Cleveland that the schools work with a lot. So random act of kindness, have other people, your colleagues, you noticing, students noticing where they can put things up on a rake board. You should have it sent to you first before it goes up on the board so it doesn't get messy. But how can you do that? How can you welcome your new students? What can you sponsor? Again, that binder photos of every kid in class lists, and you make little notes or a note card system. These are a few that I've seen teachers use successfully. It's hard to do all of these things because we're human and we have astronomical student loads, but maybe one of these will resonate with you and you will feel that you're able to implement them, or maybe you implemented them, they've fallen off to the side and you can re-implement. So next slide.
And Sarah, I just wanted to make a point. I think it's great that you bring that up. You can't do it all at once, but make it a school effort, right? The welcome wagon, the rake board, you know, get the teachers involved, the admin involved. So it's not just on one person.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. Can I have another slide? Thanks. Okay, so these are reminders. I'm sure you have seen them, have your own varieties of these. This is a reminder for you to use with your students, with colleagues who come to you. I am constantly getting colleagues needing support. So colleagues needing support and your student yourself, right? How can you ground yourself? How can you breathe? So I have these up in my school offices and it resonates with kids, right? So super easy, take a couple of minutes. I'm much better at breathing than grounding myself. And I can't meditate to save my life or be mindful. So I have to do what works for me, and that's breathing. So things available to remind you for yourself, others, your students. I just thought I would include them. So next slide. I think we're done. So question and answers. What questions do you have? Ask me a couple questions. That's my contact information. I know I'm in a different state, but if I can be helpful at all, I'm happy to do so. You can, on my webpage is my email and my phone number. So feel free to reach out. I will be in Naples in about 5 days for 2 weeks. I don't know where everybody is, so you might see me around. Questions, anything. I don't see anything come into the chat, but I'm willing to, answer anything I can.
Right. I don't see anything in the Q&A or the chat at this time. That must mean you did a fantabulous job.
For everybody cut out one or the other. I gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you did do a wonderful job. So many great nuggets that I think everyone had awesome takeaways and great tips. Yes, you're getting great replies in the chat.
I'll take
Awesome.
Gratitude, right? That was one of my tips, was to offer up gratitude. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give people their
So when
flowers
people
now.
said they're writing everything down, I think, will our slides be available?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
So-
if they're taking notes, I'm fine if my slides are sent. That's fine.
Perfect. We, yes, take notes because that helps you commit it to memory. But I
Yep.
do want to share that we will be following up with an email in regards to, of course, thanking you for being here, but we will be sharing a PDF of their presentations. So no worries. If you miss something, you can reference it. And this is actually being recorded. So I'm sure we'll be able to maybe share where this will be housed if you want to go back and listen to some of the information as well.
Perfect.
All right. Well, it looks like we are good to continue on. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that information. We truly appreciate you.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here, and I am truly grateful for, I know we're in a different state, but I really feel like it keeps spreading, and I am really, really grateful for all that you do for all of the students and colleagues that you're with. It makes the world go round. So I'm really grateful for all of your time and care and service to these kids. So
thank you.
Yeah.
And
take care,
enjoy
guys.
the Sunshine State.
Believe me, I'm jazzed. We have had snow on the ground for several, like, I think the other day it said like one of the longest in Ohio history we have had snow on the ground. So I am ready. Naples,
there
here
will be no snow here.
no snow.
Bring your suntan.
Yeah, it's a deal. It was lovely to see everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
So now we're going to just update everybody on SACAC and what's going on with SACAC. If you're a member of SACAC, then you get a newsletter. I think we just got it on Wednesday. We get the what's happening Wednesday. And this is a slide that Monique had from before COVID, but we're pretty sure that everything is still in place. I know the Sweet Tea Tour that's on there is on wait list. You can still get on the wait list for that. We have drive-in workshops like the one we're doing right now. And summer seminar is coming up this summer. That's really great for new college counselors, and dry run is for higher ed professionals. And the big one is the annual conference coming up, which Zaire talked about a little bit. It's going to be April 4th and 5th. Well, really it's Sunday, April 3rd to kind of Tuesday, April 5th. There's tours before, there's tours afterwards at colleges. I think there's still space on a couple of those college tours, but a couple of them are on wait list. And it's going to be held at the Omni Orlando Resort at Champions Gate. And that's where we have our annual meeting, but also lots and lots of sessions, including one that I'm putting together on the morning of April 4th about communicating with students and their parents effectively, because as Andrea said, students don't read emails, and kind of neither do their parents. So that's a big question I know in my practice, is how to get messages across to students and how to get them to actually read what you say. So we're going to work on that. Anyway, SACAC has so many great resources, and if you're not a member yet, we highly recommend that you become one. And Monique is going to talk a little bit more about that, especially for public school counselors.
So we have a question in the chat that I do want to answer. Someone asked about the hotels. They're sold out for the conference, and will SACAC be giving more options for accommodations? We will follow up with the conference chair, and in our follow-up email, if we have a response, we'll definitely be sure to update you. But I just advise to continue to look at the conference site for updates. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer right now, but we will try and follow up and get an answer for you. Great question. So if you are not a member, now is the perfect time, especially for those public high school counselors in SACAC region, because, drum roll please, you don't have to pay anything, right? We have a free access membership for those of you at the public high schools in our region. And so we invite you to join us for free this year. And this is such a great opportunity, being a member of SACAC, to connect with other professionals, not only school counselors, but admissions counselors as well. Now, Allison talked a little bit about some of the perks of being a member. So you go ahead when we hang up from our call today and you complete your free membership, you will then be able to apply for the Extending the Dream Professional Grant, which is a great way for you to get monies to support your efforts of helping students become college, career, and life ready. That deadline is fast approaching, March the 16th. So go ahead today, register to become a member, join us. That way you're eligible to complete that application and fund some of your programs and planning. Another opportunity, while this has closed for this conference cycle, the Council Participation Fund is a great way to support you in your efforts in attending our conferences. So the application usually is available around November. The deadline is usually February. And then those who are accepted or receive the grant, they are notified around February or early March. This covers your assistance with being able to attend professional development opportunities that SACAC hosts, such as the annual conference, summer seminar, sweet tea, and dry run. Preference will be given to counselors who work in the public high schools and community-based organizations, as well as those who serve traditionally unrepresented student populations. So this is a way for you to attend for free, right? At the expense of SACAC. So again, become a member. You can apply for the Extending the Dream grant. And next year, as a member at no cost, you can apply for the Council Participation Fund, in which that will help sponsor your attendance to the conference next year. Now, for those of you that are in the greater Orlando area or Tampa area, like me, I'm in Central Florida, we are offering a local public high school counselor day. And this year I'm serving as the local public high school counselor day chair. Monique, what does that mean? That means that you qualify to attend for free on Sunday, April the 3rd. Now, there is a cap. Because our friends with PCUF are so gracious, they are allowing the first 100 local public high school counselors to register for free. If you haven't received that information already, no worries. We will share it in our follow-up, but it's also on our website. So you can get all of that information on our website. Go to the conference page, it's there. You can't find it, don't you worry. You can contact me at lphscd@sacac.org. If you are a local counselor, I want you there. And I don't want you to have to pay, right? So if you can't come the entire time for our conference, that's okay. You can register to come for free on Sunday. And it's going to be an awesome opportunity for you to receive continuing education and for you to network with professionals that have the same goals in mind as you. Now, I see a few things in the chat.
Monique, before you move on, can you, Myrony Simpson mentioned that there's a webinar coming up next week on March 9th. She wanted us to announce, I think ETD or ETS. I don't know about that.
Okay. Myra, do you want to speak on it? Myra is one of our board directors, so thank you for being on, Myra, right here in the state of Florida. Yes, okay, give me 1 second. I will be happy to give you the privileges and rights. All it takes is a click.
Monique has the power today. She's
yes.
Around.
Okay. All right, Myra, you are welcome to unmute. You should have that capability. Okay, I see you, but you're not unmuted. Okay, I don't hear anything, but
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Myra Simpson. I'm one of the, as Monique said, the SACAC board directors, but I'm also the grants and fiscal oversight chair. So I wanted to, you might have already gotten an email about this, but I wanted to put in a plug. Since Allison and Monique did mention the Extending the Dream grant, there's actually a webinar coming up next week on March 9th about, kind of walking potential applicants through the process of applying for an ETD grant, and what are some of the things that you need to know, and what are some of what are some projects or programs that you could use the ETD grant for. So please sign up. It's March 9th. I'm going to pull up the email so that way. Let's see, Extending the Dream. Yeah, so the application is due on the 16th, but this webinar will be on March 9th at 12:30. It's called The Basics of Grant Applications, Extending the Dream Grant. So this will be done, conducted by our Extending the Dream Grant Chair, Kirsten Dufour. So please make sure, if you're interested and if you're thinking about submitting an application for this, Please make sure that you're to attend. It will be really helpful, especially if you've not done a grant application before. This will be, kind of walk you through that process and give you some helpful information on how to do that.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you always guys giving me a chance to plug this. Thank you.
Anytime. And thank you for plugging it. And if you don't mind, if you could put it in the chat, I know I'm going to register. So I hope everyone else, after they sign up, if they aren't a member already, they will save this link and be sure to attend to get more information on how to secure the bag, right? So thank you so much. All right. Now, if you notice in the corner of many of our slides, for our sponsor, Revolution Prep, and we're going to allow them a few moments to introduce themselves and talk about the program and the resources they have. Many of you may be familiar with Revolution Prep, but we have one of their representatives that's going to speak in just a few seconds. Oh, thank you, Myra, you're on it. Thank you so much. It is in the chat. So you may go ahead now and register for the webinar on March the 9th, so you can apply before March the 16th for that grant. Okay, so I don't see Marlene. Marlene, if you are on with Revolutionary Prep, if you can just indicate so in the chat to host and panelists, because we want to ensure that we give you the permissions. Okay. Allison, do you see her? I just make sure I'm not skimming over. Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll say thank you for supporting all things SACAC. And I won't act like I know what they were going to say on their slides, but we will include them with this presentation. And we will follow up with our email and with the representative to see if they have any resources that they would like to share with you all when we send out our follow-up email. Okay, this is Marlene's information. If you want to reach out and get more information about Revolution Prep prior to our follow-up email, then you are welcome to contact her at this information here. And again, we do thank them for being a premier sponsor and helping us to make this happen. So with that being said, thank you all for being here today. We had such an amazing time planning and preparing and participating. We thank all of our hosts and all of our presenters for being here. And I will allow Allison, do you have anything you'd like to add? I see the chat is popping. Yes.
No, just thank you everybody for coming, and I hope to see everybody at the conference. That would be great. So come up and say hi.
If you're going to the conference, make sure you look for both of us. We're both presenting and we're going to be out and about. So make sure you come up and speak to us. Thank you. Thank you guys for all of your positive feedback in the chat. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye, Pete. Thank you. Okay, stop. And